Hello, and welcome to Ex Cult Ed, the podcast where I share my experiences, thoughts, and feelings after leaving the truth, otherwise known as the 2x2 way, the fellowship, the one true way. You get the picture. My hope is that in sharing this, it will be cathartic for me and perhaps make you, dear listener, feel less alone if you've been through or are going through something similar. This is my story. Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on again.
Oh, no problem at all. Really enjoy being here as always.
And this is actually again because we did record this episode and then I accidentally deleted it. So we're doing it again.
Exactly. Yeah. How fun. Well, we're going to have a lot of ums and ahs probably, and we might not remember much, but this is going to be fun.
What we were hoping to talk about, the topic was a group that we found called Recovering from Religion. And they do, are they a not-for-profit group?
A not-for-profit, yeah.
Yep. I was told about them actually by someone who listened to my podcast, and they invited me along to one of the anonymous group sessions.
Yeah.
So I went along to that, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it because you have subsequently been to one, a different one to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see how you felt going to a group. I wouldn't call it group therapy. It's more just a group of people who've come out of high control religions getting together and sharing their experience. And then someone will sort of pick something that's bothering them or more pertinent to them. And then everybody will sort of weigh in. And I guess it's kind of therapy, but not.
Not a formal therapy, basically just to get together to talk about issues that people faced and are facing. Yeah.
So did you find it helpful? Or
I found it very helpful just in order to get together to see what other people were going through. I didn't actually speak much, I just listened mostly. And it was... it sort of did remind me a lot of issues that I faced in the cult that you and I both grew up in. And it was just good to hear from different experiences from others. So,
yeah, see, one of the reasons I didn't come to the session that you went to was actually because I was feeling quite burnt out that week. I mean, I feel like it's not necessarily for everyone. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to go because I tend to deal with things not in the most healthy of ways, but my approach is to just kind of keep moving forward with life. So I found that going to the session, it brought up a lot of things and put me back in a space that I haven't been in for a very long time. I mean, I do this podcast and I do think about things from being in the cult, but I do that sort of in my own time, I guess, and I can step into it and step away from it whenever I want to, whereas I found in that group session, if someone or people brought up things that were perhaps a bit triggering to me or affected me in a certain way, I couldn't step away from that. I had to sit in it, and I found that in the session I was in particularly, one of the big topics was parents and people relating to their parents, which I found quite difficult because I don't obviously have parents anymore. So while I tried to be understanding, I found that quite a difficult topic to talk about.
Yeah, that's right. It would have been very difficult for you to step back and then, come back at a later date because they'd be all gone by then. So, yeah, I understand. So I found it... not so much in that way, probably because I didn't really give too much of my story or speak about issues that I faced. So I didn't find it triggering, but I definitely may have if I did sort of, talk about from my perspective a little bit more.
Without giving anything away particularly or breaking anyone's confidence, what were the sort of themes that came up in the session that you went to?
Okay, so one major theme was just around boundaries. Boundaries that it seems like most high control religions try to strip away. So there's zero boundaries between you and the people in control in the religion especially. So one person perhaps was just speaking about the fact that they really struggled to even know what boundaries were simply because they were told through the religion that they had to be open to God at all times, and God could see everything, so they may as well just be open to everyone and to everything at all times.
But at the same time, also be completely closed to certain things that God doesn't want. So it's like you can have boundaries, but not your own boundaries.
That's right. Yeah. You can't control your own boundaries.
Yeah. Do you relate to that?
Not so much. I think in my growing up, I had a few more boundaries than perhaps a lot of other people were expected to have. I think, I grew up in a family that was very quiet. So the boundaries that we had were just about, of course, we couldn't really speak about what we were going through, but we never really entered into anyone else's problems either. So that was a bit easier for me.
See, whereas I find it very difficult to set boundaries. I feel really guilty saying no to people. And I often, even if I have a boundary, I often put that aside if other people's needs, and I think that's another thing, is putting other people's needs above your own. So I've been going to therapy a bit lately. One of my good friends gave me his EAP sessions. He was able to ask his employer if he could extend his EAP sessions to, for those who don't know, EAP stands for what? Employee Assistance Program?
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think I'm making that up probably, but anyway, it's when you're in a full-time or part-time job. Most workplaces have this program where you get 6 mental health sessions a year, and he was able to get his employer to gift those to me. So I've just finished up the 6th session now, and yeah, it was good. One of the topics that came up a lot was boundaries, and also that I value myself a lot lower than everybody else, so I often put their needs first above mine.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And yeah, the therapist did think that part of that was coming from a high control religion.
Yep.
I think in relationships, I've definitely struggled to set boundaries. I've been so used to building my life around God and around the cult that it's not that much of a stretch to build my life around a romantic partner. In fact, I find that very easy and very natural. Mm-hmm. And I actually struggle to go the other way, to be more independent, make my own choices. If I'm in a relationship, I find it really difficult, for example, to just make plans with my friends and say, hey, I'm doing this. It's something I've been trying to do this year, but before that, I would often feel like I have to check in with my partner. And even this year, I've really felt like I have to plan around my partner. So everything I do, everything I plan with my friends, I have in mind what my partner's doing, what their schedule is, and I plan around that. So I'm always available when they're free, but then I find myself getting upset or not considered when I've planned my whole schedule around them and then they're not free when they're supposed to be free.
Yeah.
I guess if I was doing a normal relationship, I'd just plan my things and be like, hey, this is when I'm free.
Does this work for you? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's probably something that I would struggle with a bit as well. That's probably more something about saying no is something that wasn't really practiced in our religion, and also probably the household that I grew up in as well.
On that saying no, I was actually listening to a podcast recently and they were talking about how one of the things that you can do for your mental health is to take stock of your social interactions and which ones are positive, which ones are draining, and sort of minimize the ones that have this negative effect on you. And I think I've very much felt this year that I've been doing things socially more for other people than for me, because I'm an introvert, and actually in my last therapy session, the therapist brought up a point for me to think about going forward, and it's who am I giving my control to and who do I want to give my control to? Because there's people in your life that you want to give up some control to. And he asked who that is, and I said, he sort of worded it as they're the people that if something happens, you want to drop everything for them and you do want to plan around them. And so I said, that's probably, at the moment, my 2 closest friends and my partner. So they're probably the people that I'd be okay giving up control to. And he also said, when you're doing things, making decisions, think about where there might be control coming from people that have been in your past or people that are still in your life, and you're giving them control perhaps without realizing, and control that you don't necessarily want them to have in your life and your decisions.
Yeah, okay. That's something I've never really considered before. Just asking myself the question about control and where I want to place it and where I'm actually giving it at the moment.
Yeah, because it's very easy for us, I think, to think about others way more than ourselves and even just give others control where they're not necessarily asking for it. We're just giving it to them.
Yeah.
And they're taking it, obviously, because if you're giving someone control, it's easy to just be like, all right.
Exactly right.
And I think we find ourselves perhaps being taken advantage of or not setting the boundaries that we want to set because we're giving up the control, where other people would say, hey, this isn't okay. Like, so one thing that I've really struggled with was a balance between my partner and my friends. And I really struggled to say what I wanted. I felt very pulled in different directions, and there was different people that wanted my time, and they're people that I love spending time with. I love spending time with my friends. I love spending time with my partner. And I really struggled because I wanted to bring them together. You know, everyone wants their individual time, which is fair enough. But I think I worked so hard on considering other people and their feelings that when I went to either thing, if I went to see my partner, I'd feel stressed because I needed to spend time with my friends. And then if I went to see my friends, I'd feel stressed because I needed to have time for my partner. So I was going to both, but I wasn't getting the full positive thing that I should be getting out of the interaction because I was too busy stressing about the other group.
Yeah, okay. And that could just come about from inability to set appropriate boundaries. So, you know, you want to take control of this and that will help you feel and everyone else feel much better.
Yeah, because I'm too busy worrying about people feeling abandoned or feeling like I'm prioritizing other people. So I wouldn't just say, hey, this is what I need or this is what I'm doing. And I've started doing it a little bit because my friends that are really close to me, they're amazing people. They are extroverts though, so they they are trying to understand, but I think I didn't really voice it before that I'm more of an introvert and I recharge on my own. And so I have sort of started to voice that when I'm like, I know we've made these plans, but I'm actually feeling really burnt out and I need time for me. And before, when perhaps they used to push it a bit more, and not out of any bad feelings or anything. I think they perhaps push it because two reasons. One, they want to see me. And two, because they're like, well, she's depressed and pushing her to go will probably make her feel better. Whereas I'm like, actually, that's not the case. Going will probably make me more depressed. I just need to recharge a bit in whatever way works for me. And I need to try to take time to focus on doing the things that I enjoy for my mental health, really. And I think that the struggle that I have with that is feeling selfish. So when I try to focus on me and I'm like, I need to do these things to feel better, then I feel selfish. I feel like I need to be doing productive things or doing things for other people in order to be valuable. In that sense, with the friends thing, basically I was giving control to my friends or my partner, control that they weren't necessarily even asking for. They probably would have been a lot more okay if I just said, hey, this is what I need. And hopefully if they're good friends and good partner, they will accept that.
Yep.
And one example is at get-togethers sometimes I just feel like I need to just step away to a quiet room just for a second to just recuperate, just get a little bit of a break. And so recently there was a Christmas party at one of my friends' houses, and just every now and then I'd just duck into a room and just sit there and chill. And a couple of times my friend came and was like, what are you doing? Get out there. And I'm just like, I'm just taking a minute. Normally I would have felt guilty about that, and I didn't, even though they came a few times and were like, what are you doing? Get out and socialize. I'm like, I'm just taking a minute. I just need a minute. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong. There's nothing wrong. It's just that's me. That's what I need. I just need
time to recharge.
Well, sometimes people are being loud, and you just need a minute, really.
No, fair enough. I think that's really great that you've sort of learned that about yourself, and you're taking control of it, which is really good.
Trying to, but it's still very, very hard not to worry about offending other people. And I think it's a big thing from being in the cult. When we offend people, we tend to put that on our shoulders instead of being like, well, that's kind of on them because I'm not doing anything to hurt someone else. Like me saying this is what I need, and it's not harming someone else, and it's not conflicting with their needs. I mean, it's different if one of my friends was like, hey, I really need you, and I'm like, well, F you, this is what I need. But I did have some time recently where all of myself and my friends were all quite burnt out, and we all sort of said, hey, we just kind of need to do our own thing. We're feeling really burnt out. It's that time of year, and love to be there for each other, but we need to recharge ourselves first and then can be there for each other.
Sounds like they're learning from you.
No, I think I'm learning from them
From
for
them
sure.
still, yep.
Is there anything more you wanted to say on the topic of boundaries or control? Or?
Yes, certainly. I really enjoyed what you said earlier about our tendency to often give over more control if we find that things aren't going well. And I think that would be probably something that happened in a previous long-term relationship of mine as well. I think people in these high control religions like we grew up in, we think of relationships being a certain way. And if things aren't working out, we'd probably just, as a matter of course, just give over more control thinking, well, this will fix it. And it obviously doesn't. So
No, because instead of stating your needs so that you can both
Work
fix
on
it,
that. Yep.
yeah, you're just giving it and then they take it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. Without knowing even.
See, the thing I've had is obviously in the cult we weren't really we were allowed to state our needs, I guess, but we'd get certain reactions like, "What? You're selfish. You're this or that."
Yeah. Yep.
And since leaving the cult, I have stated my needs to different people and they've responded poorly or reacted poorly. And I've started to realize, and these specific needs are in the realm of emotional support. And something that I've started to realize is that it's not necessarily me asking for an unreasonable level of emotional support.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I have come a long way and I did need a lot more support in the past than I perhaps need now. But I think it's more that I had been choosing or going to people who weren't capable or willing to provide that emotional support, and I was expecting that from them.
Yeah.
So in a way, that was unfair from me to expect that sort of support from someone. I need to recognize when people aren't able to provide that support and then be like, okay, well, that's something I need to find from someone else.
Yeah.
The struggle is when you're trying to be in a relationship with someone who can't or won't, or just can't or won't provide the emotional support that you're needing.
Yep.
And then perhaps you go to your friends for that support and then
That can cause problems.
It can, but the fact is I do need that support, especially because I can be a bit of a roller coaster. Anyone who knows me knows that. I'm up and down. And when I'm down, I definitely need someone to talk to and vent to. And yeah, I go to whoever is willing to provide that support at the time. And I'm also someone who's very willing, because I know how much emotional support I need. I'm very open to other people venting to me, especially people I care about. Mm-hmm. And I guess because of that, I used to struggle to understand how other people, especially men in relationships, couldn't provide that support. And I've discovered it's because they perhaps feel helpless because they can't do anything about it. And I try to explain, well, all I need is for you to listen. But I feel like sometimes in romantic relationships, they take it on themselves. And
that's often a weakness of men, thinking that everything's a problem to solve rather than just providing an ear to listen. Yeah, that's something I think I need to learn more as well, but it's probably just an ongoing process.
Yeah, but I think the point I was making there was more that I would take it on me if they responded poorly, and I'd be like, okay, so my needs or my expectations are unreasonable or I'm too much, when in fact it's not that I'm unreasonable, it's not that what I need is unreasonable or that my expectations are too much. It's more that those people aren't able to provide those things, and that's okay. That's just a difference in, what's the word I'm looking for, compatibility or convergence in that area.
Yep.
And it doesn't really say anything about either of us. There's just different people have different capacities for different things.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I don't think that any emotional support needs of yours would be over the top or too much. It's just what you need.
What I'm trying to say is asking for things or asking for your needs to be met by other people, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will or are capable of meeting those needs. And it also means that if they do respond poorly, that doesn't mean that you necessarily need to reevaluate what you're asking for. Because if you've identified that this is something that you need from people or a person, if the person you go to isn't able to provide it, then
it's not a reflection on you.
No, and it's not necessarily a reflection on them either. Exactly. It just means that you need to find someone who can meet those needs. And it doesn't necessarily mean, say, if you're in a romantic relationship, finding a new partner.
No.
It just means perhaps finding someone as a friend who can meet those needs, because I don't believe that your partner can be everything, or I used to.
Yep.
I used to want my partner to be everything, and I would love my partner to be my best friend and the person that my confidant, the one that I want to talk to first about everything. So if anything's going bad or good, I would love them to be the person that I want to call and talk about it. That's important to me. And so that's probably something that I should raise going into things, because if someone doesn't want to be that or isn't capable of being that, then perhaps there's an incompatibility there.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that I should just suddenly change and be like, oh, okay, well, this is something I need, but I'm going to put it away to make this relationship work, which is something I've done in the past a lot, is put away parts of myself to make things work.
Yeah, very interesting.
I don't think we actually talked about that on the deleted episode at all.
No, that's a good addition. Another thing I'd like to mention too is just the nature of boundaries. It was spoken about there at the group. One of the organisers just let people know in a really soft way that boundaries aren't telling other people what they can and can't do. Boundaries are basically just outlining what will happen if someone does something, or if someone does something else, your behaviour will change as well.
So it's basically saying action and consequences.
That's right, yeah.
Which is definitely something we weren't taught, and something I've struggled with, because I do set boundaries and say it's something I'm not comfortable with, but then when people break them, there are no consequences.
Yeah, because we struggle to figure out what to do in that case, yeah.
I mean, say, for example, with my house, right? Like, it's important to me that people take off their shoes. And that's just something that I want to do in my living environment, because I don't like walking on floor with my bare feet thinking that people have tracked in whatever's on their shoes onto my floor. And actually, I did have a friend who came over with their shoes on, and I had said to them before they came, would you mind taking your shoes off when you come? Because they'd come a previous time and not taken them off. And I hadn't said anything because I didn't want to offend them, but it really annoyed me. So the next time they came, I just sent them a message before saying, hey, would you mind just taking your shoes off when you come? And they said, yep. Then they came and they didn't take their shoes off. And so I didn't invite them over again. And I probably could have had a conversation about it, but I felt quite uncomfortable. I didn't want to bring it up.
Yep.
So instead of that, I was like, look, I've raised it. They ignored it. And so I'm just not having them at my house anymore.
Yep.
Probably not the best way to go about it. I probably should have had more of a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard setting consequences, because you don't want to feel like a parent who's like, well, if you don't do this, then I'm going to confiscate your something. Like, what are the consequences for that?
Yeah. No, sometimes it can be difficult, can't it?
You hope that the disappointment will be enough. If they're people that care about you.
Yeah.
But if they're people that don't care about you, I mean, the fact is, I guess, if they don't care about you and upsetting you isn't enough to
stop them,
especially in your own house, then they're probably not people that you want around, because they're not respecting you.
Exactly, yeah.
Because in other people's houses, it's their rules.
Yep.
Or in people's cars, it's their rules. Like, if you eat in your car, but one of your friends says, hey, I don't want any food in my car, you respect that, because that's their car and that's their boundary, and you don't just go, oh, well, I eat in my car, why can't I eat in yours?
Yeah. So disrespectful to do that.
Yeah. But I do think in that scenario, if I had a friend who, I mean, I eat in my car, so it's not a big deal, but if I had a friend, if I didn't eat in my car and I had a friend who got in my car with food, I would probably feel very uncomfortable saying something.
Yeah, yep. And so would I.
Yeah.
Always good lessons on how to or when to put in place boundaries and how important they are.
Well, I think the fact is that people probably would prefer that you say something than just silently fume at them and not invite them into your house or your car or your life or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. Yep. As a parent, when you have children, you sort of understand very quickly that children love testing boundaries, but they really rely on them, because without boundaries, like quite firm boundaries on the outsides of their behaviour, they just feel lost. They don't know. They don't have any guardrails to tell them what to do. So,
and that's the hard bit. Is I think that some of my boundaries or things are perhaps a little more than other people's. So cleanliness and all of that is very important to me. So it's things like people taking off their shoes, which I don't think is unreasonable in a house to ask people to take off shoes. But then it sort of extends to, I really hate when people touch the walls, because then I feel like I have to clean the walls. And that does come from when I was younger. In my house, it was drummed into me to not touch the walls. You leave grubby fingerprints on the walls because your hands have oils in them, and then you touch the walls and you leave marks on the walls, and then they need cleaning. So I was raised to not touch walls and not lean on walls and things if I don't have to. So when people do it, it annoys me because I'm like, oh, they're marking the walls and then I'm going to have to clean them. And then I think about, oh, now I might have to repaint them if they get too dirty, or if I try to clean them and then paint gets ruined. But then I feel like if I have friends over and they're leaning on the wall, I can't be like, hey, don't lean on the wall. But I have had incidences of I was sitting in my office and someone was coming to talk to me and they kept touching the wall. So I've stopped talking to them when I'm in my office because I don't like them touching the wall. So I think instead of setting the boundaries or stating that there's things that I don't like, I just go straight to the consequence instead of having an awkward conversation.
Yeah, yep. When the awkward conversation might clear things up a bit quicker.
I think it also depends on how people respond. If you think they're going to be defensive, you just are like, oh, well, I'll just go to the consequence. I'll just cut it out.
Yep. Cut them off.
Yeah, whereas I do have some people in my life who are like, look, if there's anything that's bothering you, even if I think it's ridiculous, I'd rather you just say it and we'll go from there rather than I randomly drop off for some unknown reason. I think just sort of really getting honest with yourself and being like, well, what are the things that I do and don't want in my life, and what are the things that bother me, and separating that from whether that makes you a good or bad person or not.
Yeah, I think that's the key to beginning to learn how to set boundaries. And then, of course, it's always a struggle learning how to do it better and better each time, isn't it?
Well, people might think I'm weird because I don't like fingers on the walls. I don't like crumbs on the benches. Like, I hate going into a kitchen and someone's left crumbs there.
Yeah.
And some people might like to live like that, but I don't.
Yep. So I reckon just keep in mind that everyone's weird, so just celebrate your weirdness.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've met other people who are the same. They don't like crumbs. Like, who likes to go into a kitchen with crumbs on the counter? I don't know.
I don't know either.
But I do know that perhaps in the cult, a lot of people would keep their houses quite clean and tidy because we would often be having guests a lot. And you would want to have a really nice, tidy house for them. You wouldn't want things around if people popped in or if you're having friends over. I think we kind of put masks on our homes as well as ourselves in a way.
Yep, I think so as well.
If that makes sense.
That seemed to happen a lot.
If there was anything inappropriate, it would be hidden.
Yep.
And I say inappropriate, I mean like if you had wine glasses, which we didn't, but
Yeah.
I know people who did and they would just keep them hidden, or people who did have a beer and that, they'd keep them somewhere in a different fridge hidden. So I think there's some people who hid televisions, or, you know, if they listened to music and stuff, their iPods or whatever, they'd get put away, especially if the preachers were coming.
Yeah.
So just anything that might be not approved of by the people entering your house, you would hide. Instead of being like, this is how I live, this is my house, you would have to actually hide parts of you in your house. You'd not just put on a mask yourself. You would mask your whole life for them, your whole house,
that's right.
everything.
Yep. Everything was in search of the greater look for the church rather than how you wanted to live your life. But it's quite interesting because now that I'm thinking about it, I remember going to plenty of friends' houses, and I'd always feel just a little bit more comfortable if the house wasn't completely perfect. It didn't have to be dirty or anything, but it just had to feel lived in. I think.
I find that I much prefer comfortable houses. I mean, I admire houses that are done up nicely, but you don't want to walk into a house that feels like a display home.
No, that's right. Yep.
So yeah, I do like that.
You might never feel comfortable touching the walls.
Well, I would never touch anyone's walls. Like, I would... You know, people who just walk around and just trail their hands on the walls. Like, why would you do that?
That's just terrible, yeah.
It seems like monsters.
Yeah.
Imagine if there's stairs in people's house and you walk up the stairs and just trail your hands on the wall.
Yeah, wouldn't be good.
In the cult, we would call them devils. No, really, we didn't refer to anyone as devils. That would actually, I don't know.
Yeah, so anyone outside was lost, but anyone inside was just a naughty boy, probably.
What, women couldn't be naughty?
No, couldn't be naughty.
Okay, that's true. Yeah, that was illegal.
Yeah, that was really bad, but guys being naughty was perfectly fine.
It actually was, you know.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, men being naughty was sort of seen more as cheeky, but women, like, no, they had to be proper.
Yeah, yep.
Or else they were just tainted.
Yep, and they had too much of their own opinion, and that wasn't good.
Yeah, but nobody could really have an opinion.
No, not unless it was the approved opinion. Remember how boring it was talking in groups like that?
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah, everyone was saying the exact same thing.
Well, nobody really asked for opinions on things.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about things. We just talked about so-and-so doing such and such.
Gossip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were saying recently, actually, about the numbers. You're saying that the numbers have dropped quite a lot in the cult that we were in.
Yeah, well, there's absolutely no firm numbers that anyone can really gauge. But from what I understand, the peak would have been around the mid-80s.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there, it's dropped. I think it's dropped quite a bit. So I would assume that most churches have done the same. But there could be, of course, brand new high control religions who have expanded in that time. So,
what do you think that the numbers are now?
From estimates I've seen, they've been as high as, 700,000, 800,000 in the 80s, but now down to maybe even as low as 140,000 worldwide.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I know that the conventions have been dropping, the numbers of them. So there used to be 3 and now there's 1 or 2 conventions. So numbers have been dropping. I think it's a lot easier now in our generation for people to leave, and I think perhaps it's easier to leave for a couple of reasons. One, because there's a lot more information out there that's easy to access, such as this podcast. No, this is nobody's going. I mean,
this
like,
is a great help. This is.
But support groups on social media where people who are in there can jump into the support group and see what other people are saying and feeling, and then be like, I relate to that. See other people's journeys online and know that they can get out and it'll be okay. Yep. Whereas when I left, I mean, it was 5-6 years ago. I don't know if those support groups existed, or I just didn't know about them. I think they probably existed. I didn't know anything. So seeing them now has been very helpful, and I would have loved to have known about them 5 years before I left, because I would have been one of those people in there seeing these people and knowing it would be okay, because I left completely blind and feeling like, well, I don't know how I'm going to exist in the world. But when you see other people going through the same things, having the same fears, and then people who are further along in that journey, reassure them and tell them how they've gotten through it, it's really helpful. And I do think perhaps that's one of the advantages of, say, the Recovering from Religion group. Even though these people come from different high control religions, I do think there is a little bit of a difficulty, though, for, say, me relating to someone else who's in a different high control religion, just because I don't understand the nuances of their religion as much as, say, in the X2x2 specific groups, because there's certain things that we can joke about, meme about, laugh with each other about. Yep. Whereas it's sort of a bit more difficult to make fun and meme with other religions because I don't know so much about them. And also, you don't want to say the wrong thing and offend someone from a different high control religion.
Yep, which you could easily do. So you have to have more generalised humour, which is usually not quite as funny or pointed.
Yeah, and you also don't know what people believe. But so I think that the information is one of the reasons why more people are leaving. And I think perhaps the other reason is just because more people are leaving. So it makes it a lot easier for those who are in it to be like, well, I know I've seen these people in my life leave. They're out there now and they can go to them for support, because even since starting my podcast, I've had strangers and friends reach out to me, the people who I knew who I actually never saw leaving it, who've reached out and said, I heard your podcast and I'm leaving, or my husband and I are leaving, and sort of connect that way.
That's really special. So you've been a great help to a select few, which is really good.
Yeah, well, I think it's just knowing that there's people that you know who are surviving it.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, when you left, did you have access to any support or anything that helped you leave?
No, not really. It was just more of a mutual decision between myself and my then partner. And we both agreed to do it, really. So
you didn't know anyone who'd left before then, or?
Well, in the back of my mind, I'd known quite a few who had left, but no one really to reach out to and speak to.
Yeah. See, I think that's really important, because you're leaving this group that has so much social support, and then you're going out into the world where you don't necessarily have social support. So having these groups are really important. I think it's even better in a way if you know people, because talking to someone you know personally is obviously it's great.
Yep. Can't be better, can it?
Well, because they know you and your history, and you know them, and then I think there's a lot more trust in them and yourself in the process then, because you know what sort of person they are.
Yep.
I think going to these support groups with strangers, you're sort of like, oh, it's easier to just be like, oh, well, they're better than me, or their group's different, or they have all this other support that I don't have, or something.
Yeah.
It's easier to write it off as something else. But still, if that's your only support, it's a great support to have.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. And especially if you're struggling a lot with it, if the transition has been fairly easy for you, or you've got through the really hard parts and just pushed through yourself or with a small circle of close friends, then perhaps the recovering from a religion group might not be so necessary for you. But I do think that it can be very necessary for a lot of people who have just left or who even years later are still really struggling with things.
Yeah, I think for me, I need to pace myself with it, because I find with these groups, hearing other people talk about things, it actually brings up issues that I have that I didn't know I had.
Yes.
And I'm going to say it like that because I don't think it's creating issues in me.
Yep.
I think it's just things that I'm like, yeah, actually, I am struggling with that. That is something.
Yeah.
Which is great, because it points out stuff that you've been doing or in your behavior that you maybe aren't aware of, and you don't really know what to look for if you're not looking for it.
Exactly right. Yeah, knowing this group, that was something that I found as well. Just listening to different points of view, I'm like, wow, I've never really thought about it this way. Now I've got to sort of think about my own life and say, hey, have I struggled in this in the past?
As long as you're not creating more problems for yourself.
Yeah, that's right. It's a balancing act.
Because, yeah, there's something sort of about sharing trauma that it's great and it's also traumatic. I think sometimes I tend to take other people's trauma on myself.
Yep.
And other times, like the one that I went to, I just was in my own trauma, I think, and I was really struggling to relate because I was like, well, I don't have parents, and all these people who are older than me are struggling with their relationship with their parents and struggling with maybe going to lose them soon. And I'm like, well, I lost mine when I was 16, you know. I'm thankful for that time. Like, I would much rather have my mum around disapproving of me and my life choices than not to have her at all, because a lot of the people, things that they struggle with are families that are still in these high control religions that are trying to convert them back or making comments. You know, I see it in a lot of people that have left with friends and family still in it. People just sort of making little comments that annoy them.
Yep.
And something that I try to remember is that although it's hard, they come from a place of care, and these people don't know any better. So in a way, you're the enlightened one now, even though you thought you were the enlightened one when you were in the religion.
Yep.
Now that you've left, you have lived a reality that they never have.
Yep.
So they don't understand it at all.
Yep.
And it sucks that you leave and then the burden of being a good person and being the understanding one is still on you.
Yeah, that's
even
right.
Even though you're like, well, freedom, like I don't want to give a flying fish about anybody.
But you still find that because they're close to you, that you have to care about them, and you should care about them. But then again, where are your boundaries?
Yeah.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It is. When you meet up with them, I don't know if you find this with your friends and family, but they talk about the religion. They know that you've been in it, of course, and they sort of expect that you will talk as though you're still in it, or you'll participate in grace or things like that you don't want to anymore.
Yep.
And perhaps it is a matter of just saying, look, this is how I've chosen to live my life. I love you and I hope that you love me. And if we're going to have a relationship, I'm not going to try to convince you to live my way of life. And I would like you to not convince me to try to live your way of life. This is what we've chosen. Love to spend time together and just connect over something else.
Exactly right. Yeah. Yep.
But it is hard because for them, the big thing they talk about when they get together is what's been said in the meetings, and anything to do with the cult. It's kind of probably hard to focus on other things because it's so much part of them.
And they're told that's all that's important.
So I think sometimes it's a matter of being understanding.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote that I really like, and it's, if you're faced with the decision of whether to be kind or to be right, choose kind. And I think that's
very wise.
It's hard though.
It certainly is, yeah, because in order to be kind and to listen, you don't necessarily have to agree, but you do have to put down that response in yourself to go, oi, you're wrong.
Yeah, and I do think that sometimes with the boundaries thing, it's not necessarily letting them slide.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
picking your battles.
That, and just sort of being understanding of other people's intent.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all have boundaries and triggers and different things that people are going to cross unknowingly.
Yep.
And I think sometimes it's a matter of reading their intent and saying, well, are they intentionally crossing my boundary and trying to hurt me, or is this something that they're not aware of? Such as, for example, my friend with the shoes, you know. I felt like because I'd said it to them that I didn't want to have to keep nagging. I didn't want to be that person.
Yep.
And I'm sure that they didn't have any bad intent. So, you know, I'm kind of thinking about it, well, I could just try and invite them again and ask them again, oh, would you mind taking off your shoes?
Yeah,
Especially on the carpeted areas, you know, but even on the tiles.
Yeah.
But again, their intent wasn't bad.
No. And perhaps they could have forgotten. You don't know really, do you? So,
well, I'm sure they did. I doubt that they're in their head like, no, I'm not going to respect my friend at all.
Exactly, yeah.
So, especially when it comes to families, though, and people you care about, I think it really comes down to intent, especially when we haven't communicated our boundaries. It's hard to be angry at someone for crossing them if they don't even know what our boundaries are.
Yep.
I also think it's really hard to communicate them because sometimes, especially with families and that, it gets to a point where you're so frustrated with them that when you try to communicate the boundary, it comes across as being quite, well, it could come across as being quite angry and demanding instead of coming from a place of care and like, I'm communicating this because I want to spend time with you. I'm not communicating this to drive a wedge. I'm communicating this because spending time together has become quite difficult for me lately. And if these things aren't addressed, I'm going to cut down our time for my mental health. So I'm addressing these things actually because I want to strengthen our relationship.
Yep. And you care about them. Exactly. Yep.
But instead, I think sometimes people come at it like, you're trying to change me. Every time I see you, I'm just always the bad one. Like, can't you just respect me and love me? And then the other side feels attacked. And then they get defensive. So it's a very difficult path to navigate.
Certainly is, yeah. I'm just trying to think back to even like the shoes thing, what my family would have done when I was growing up. And I just have this idea in mind that nothing would have been said to anyone. The floor would have been cleaned afterwards, but absolutely nothing would have been said. No boundaries, nothing, yeah.
See, I was just always raised to take my shoes off at people's houses.
So was I.
If they say leave them on and if their floors are really dirty, then I will. But often people say leave them on and I take them off anyway because I just see it as a respect thing. But I have to remember not everybody was raised that way. In fact, some people were raised wearing shoes in the house all the time.
Yep.
So I can't necessarily have someone over and they wear shoes in my house and I'm like, how rude, how disrespectful, because they don't see it that way.
Yeah, yep.
And that's something that's important, I think, to remember in daily life, is that people aren't necessarily intending to be rude even though you find it rude.
Yep.
It's just a whole different lens.
That's right. But I think you're such a caring person that's what you naturally gravitate to anyway, is understanding rather than sticking to your own guns. So.
It depends how frustrated I am, though.
Yep.
I mean...
Everyone has limits.
Or maybe I'm just getting less tolerant as I get older, but I'm trying. I actually think I would like to go to the next session because I'd sort of like to talk about something that I'm struggling with a bit, and that is fitting in the workforce. I think perhaps it was easier to fit in the workforce when in the cult because you knew you had a group of people that you belonged to, so it was almost, you saw it as a privilege to be excluded in work, to be different. It was like, I'm different from everyone else, but that's because God.
Yeah, because I've got a larger group of people behind me
Yeah.
that I can go back to and explain how uncomfortable I feel at work.
Yeah, whereas I'm really struggling. The last few jobs I've had, all of them, I've sort of been bullied out of the job by other women in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And I'm very different to them. And even just setting boundaries within the workplace, they don't agree with my boundaries. For example, one of them is I want to leave on time. I'm a casual worker, so I'm only paid up until the end of my shift, and I do arrive early. So they see it as being a team player if you hang around a bit longer to help out your colleagues. And we don't clock on and off, so we're not paid for that extra time. Mm-hmm. And the other side of it is I see it as a team player, as this is what I do. I always make sure I'm ready to take over the shift for the next person so they can leave on time. Yep. And I think that everybody should do that, because for me, if you're working past your shift and not getting paid for it, that's not helping out your colleagues, that's volunteering, and the person that's winning is your boss. And I volunteer on Mondays, and that's something that I choose to do. I don't want to volunteer at my job.
No.
And I don't think that that's being selfish. I think that that's setting a boundary. I'm paid from this time to this time. That's the time I'm there to work.
Yep.
And that's been a struggle at my current workplace. Other workplaces, they've just, I don't know why, the women have just taken a disliking to me, and it's been very cliquey and gossipy, and then it's kind of got to the point of them giving me the task that nobody else wants to do, and it just gets to a point where I'm like, yeah, I can't turn up anymore to work because people are being mean, and I don't know.
It's really sad.
So I'm not sure why that keeps happening. I don't know if it's something about me and my self-confidence, if I need to go in being like, look, these are my needs.
I have a real issue with like cliquey behaviour.
Yeah.
I think it's more a reflection on them than you, because most bosses that I've worked for and worked with, they'd be very much on your side of the camp saying, okay, you should be there and ready to start at the start of your shift. And just as bosses value their time extremely well, they would expect you to value your time as well. Once you're finished, everyone should be ready to take over, and you should be on your way.
Yeah, so that's a struggle I've had. And then at another job that I had, it was little things that developed into bigger things. But for example, one of the things was we were all equals. So we were supposed to take it in turns, emptying the bins at the end of the day in the office. And the other staff member that was on my level, because she had more of a degree than me, I think she just thought she was above me. So they all were just expecting me to empty the bins every day. And so I was the one, even though we were all doing the same job, I was the one who was going around emptying the bins at the end of every day, until we got a new colleague who came in, and she was great. She was lovely. And she was like, why is she emptying the bins all the time when we should all be taking it in turns doing it?
Yep.
And everyone in the office was like, no, she likes doing it. I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
And so she would take turns with me doing it sometimes.
Yep.
But I think it's a really hard one, because I allowed myself to be treated that way. I didn't say, no, you do it. I was just like, oh, okay, I'm doing it. And everybody would offload their work on me as well. So I'd be doing my work and then everybody else's.
Yeah.
And then when they'd make mistakes, they'd sort of blame me. And then they'd go have meetings with the bosses and blame me for it when it was their mistake, and I'd be covering their mistake. I was struggling at that job so much that my hair was falling out. I went to the doctor and I got B12 injections. So it was affecting my physical health as well.
Yep.
Yeah, then the next job I had here, similar kind of thing. The managers were just walking all over me.
Yep.
And I was just accepting it. I wasn't standing up for myself and saying, hey, how come other people are being treated differently? How come I'm having to do this and I'm not getting to do the jobs that people enjoy? I'm just doing all the bad ones.
Yeah. Yep.
And yeah, I ended up quitting that job and writing a 5-page letter to the area manager. Obviously, nothing really would have come of it because culture. And then, yeah, sort of feeling that way in my current job, which is really affecting me a lot because I need a new job. It's got to the point where my current job is only offering me 1 shift a week now because everybody's pally with the owners and that. So yeah, I do need a new job, but I'm kind of lost a lot of my confidence to fit in. I'm very scared of getting into another job where I'm treated this way, when the fact is I know I'm very capable of doing any job. The customers love me. Like, I'm really good at communicating and I'm good at everything that the job comes with.
Yep.
I'm just not good at standing up for myself and setting boundaries, and so therefore people viewing me as an equally valued team member.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I completely agree with that analysis of yours. I do think that there's nothing wrong with you whatsoever. As you mentioned before, it's probably just the culture of the places you worked at more than anything else. Any place, especially with employment, they have a top-down culture. I think this is the same in churches as well, and it comes right from the top. And if that culture is wrong, you'll see people at all levels really being horrible, maybe without realizing it, and maybe just enjoying the freedom that they have to be horrible to others. But if you're in that position, I don't think it's anything to do with you whatsoever.
But I think the problem is when you go in with low self-confidence,
Yep,
that is quickly taken advantage of and sort of creates that environment for yourself in a way.
Yeah.
Because if you go in feeling like I'm less than everybody else, I'll do the jobs they don't like, then you're not respecting yourself, so then other people don't respect you. And that's something that I need to work on, is respecting myself and therefore expecting other people to respect me. And that's not being entitled. It's just saying, look, I'm an equal person here. I'm equally valued.
And you're equally as good at your job. And everyone should be taking turns to do all of the required things that people
Yeah.
need to do.
And it's not coming into a new job feeling entitled and being like, look, I'm not going to do the things that people don't like, even though I'm the new person. That's fine. It's more when you're being treated unfairly in a way, like discriminated against in the workplace is
and
different.
not respected for who you are. That's right.
Yeah, not valued and
valued.
not given the opportunities to work your way up, I guess.
Yep.
I think that that's something that I'm definitely needing to work on, is building up that self-respect in order to set those boundaries and be firm in them.
Yeah. Yep. No, that sounds like a good idea. I think you're right on the money there.
Well, what about you you said you haven't had so much trouble with it?
No. So mostly I've just enjoyed the places I've worked at. Perhaps it's more of a luck thing.
Although I do think that you probably did go out of your way quite a bit for your bosses.
In some ways, absolutely.
That's not a bad thing necessarily. It's just more if you feel like they were taking advantage or not.
Exactly right. Yeah, I do think that in some of the places I've worked, I've learnt a lot. So I've enjoyed doing more than I strictly needed to do. But in that case, it's probably another case of me not knowing also exactly how to set strong boundaries of what's required from me and also what I require from employers as well.
See, for me, when I'm looking back at my employment history and I'm like, look, I've been bullied out of 3 jobs, that's a pattern. Therefore, there must be something in me that's also creating this, because it's one thing to say, oh, you've just worked in places with bad culture. And perhaps because I'm in retail, a lot of the places do have bad culture. I think that it's definitely a sort of person that has been in each of those workplaces, a very specific type of person.
Yep.
The people that end up bullying me are people that are not happy in their own lives and they take it out on other people. Exactly. But my question for that is, why me? You know, why does that keep happening to me? And so I have to look inwards and be like, well, I'm not respecting myself.
Yep.
So
I do have a male friend of mine who went through the same thing. And from what I could work out from what they were telling me, which we went through all of the details, it seemed like since he was a new person, he was targeted basically in order to giving him an example of this is how we do things and I'm the boss. So that's what the person who'd been there for many years was doing to every new person.
See, this wasn't the case for me, because at the first job that I was talking about, the person who was instigating all of it was actually someone who joined after me.
Ah, okay.
So I had been there longer than this person.
Yep. So not that.
No,
at
and
all.
then at the second job, even though I was the one that was bullied out of it, and other employees there that I was friends with agreed that it was bullying, I joined with someone else at the same time, and they were not targeted the same way at all. And there was people who joined since who were not. And then at my current job, it's also people who've come after me.
Yep.
I allow colleagues to talk down to me, and I'm very non-confrontational. I let it slide.
Yep.
And speaking up is just, you know, I've had a colleague at this current job swearing at me, and when I speak up, it's a huge thing for me, and they just shut me down immediately.
Yep.
So I find it very difficult because I'm just that personality.
Yep.
And yeah, it is very scary for me because it's really putting me off the workforce and I need a job.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely eating away at that, and then I don't bring my best self to the workplace either. Because I'm so worried about people putting me down.
Yep, that you go into a shell and people find that shell very easy to kick. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I'm going to have to work on that. And hopefully the next workplace that I'm in, I won't put up with stuff because I'll know. I definitely don't want to be stuck in jobs out of fear that there's not anything better, because anything different can be better. It could be worse, but it could be better. But doing something and changing something is better than doing nothing. If 26 years in the Colton taught me anything, it taught me that.
Yep.
Change is scary, but
Totally
it can be better. I was thinking about how I was at that Christmas party recently and people were asking me about what I'm doing and what courses I want to do and whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just sort of figuring it out. I'm feeling a bit directionless at the moment and I'm trying to find a direction. And it sort of feels like everybody going to these things, they want to be the best, you know, they want to be like, oh, I've got my life together and here's my advice for your life. They started giving me advice as well because they asked me if I was going to finish my psych degree, and I said, well, I rang the unis and because I've done it so many years ago, I'll have to do an extra year, and I don't really have the time and money for that. And they were like, well, doing that extra year will greatly increase your salary and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look, I didn't say it. I just sort of shut up. But in my head, I was like, well, money isn't the main thing I want out of a career. I want job enjoyment. That's more important to me. Money is obviously a big factor, but I want to do something that I enjoy doing. And I don't know what I want from my life. I don't know. I mean, obviously I'd like to make some kind of difference in the world, but I used to be very career driven, and now I think I'm sort of more family orientated. Not that I really have one to be orientated towards, but I think that's sort of where I'm hoping to go in the future. Coming out of the cult, I think I was very anti that because it was so traditional and it was so what we were raised to be, that I was like, no, I want to be a lot more independent. And now I'm like, no, I don't think that's for me, and I think that's okay. Like I'm not that person. So I'm still just trying to discover myself. But I do feel that there's a lot of shame around, especially being at my age and not knowing who I am or where I want to go. I mean, I think I kind of know who I am now, but not knowing where I want to go, not having this fancy schmancy career and all of these things. It sort of leaves me sometimes listening to other people and them telling everything that they're doing and about their careers. I'm like, well, I'm kind of boring, kind of nothing. Like it makes me very negative in my head.
Yeah, that would be really hard to live with and to grow through, wouldn't it? Just realizing that all the directions that you were led basically with a halter on in your early life, you're then pushed away, and then you've sort of now discovered a little bit of who you are, and now's the time to find out where you're going, but that can take a while, can't it? So.
Yeah, and I think it's very hard because people expect that you have your life together, and those that sort of do want to give advice, but they don't know me really, so it makes it quite difficult. I think I found myself having quite a reaction to that because of my, not necessarily because of them and what they're saying, but because of my internal shame around it, of being like, well, if my life had been different, I would have been here. You know, I could have been a psychologist by now if I had kept studying and not got married, or if I hadn't have left that marriage and made it work, I could have been a partner with kids and, that happy family sort of thing. So there's a lot of that shame about being this sort of directionless person at the moment. But this is the thing, right? I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to just pick a direction and take it out of fear of not having a direction.
That's right. So, and the only thing you have is your direction and not any life satisfaction or knowing that you were or you are who you are.
And I think a big thing for me as well is not waiting to be happy. It's just trying to be happy now. And not being like, oh, I need to get somewhere and then I'll be happy, or I need to get somewhere and then I'll be worth something. I need to find things about me and myself right now that are worthwhile, that I can be proud of to tell other people. And actually something that I want to do, another thing I want to do, I've said all these things I want to do, I'm going to have to write them all down or I'm not going to end up doing them. I want to keep a joy journal for the next month until the new year, so a bit less than a month. I want to start writing down something at the end of every day that made me happy, that sort of brought a bit of a spark to me. And it could be just a little thing, just something every day that I really enjoyed, that made me happy, and then I'll read back over them at the end of the month. And I think, it might help me realize the things that make me happy because I'm writing them down every day. It might help me sort of get a bit of a direction or find something out about myself.
Yeah, I think because you already probably have a lot of hidden happiness in your life, it'd be good to uncover that and find it.
Yeah, just taking a minute to be like, okay, what's making me happy just every day? Because at the moment, things seem to be going wrong. Podcasts, I've lost 2 episodes because my computer crashed. My pool salt cells got eaten by calcium, so I've had to spend way more than I earn in a week to buy a new one. So it just feels like everything's going wrong. My gutters are rusting. Like, I don't know. It's like sometimes life can just get really overwhelming, right?
Yeah, yep.
Especially this time of the year.
Yeah. Probably a really wrong time to bring this up on an ex-Christian podcast, but I've heard a quote from Buddha, I think it was. It's probably apocryphal. Someone asked Buddha, I want to be happy. And Buddha said, get rid of I, because that's just ego speaking. Get rid of want, because all that is desire. You can have your own ego and you can have desires, but just stick with happiness for now.
So it's just be happy.
Exactly.
But don't be hedonistic?
Something like that. Well, I don't mind hedonism. Everyone has a hedonistic level or a level of hedonism.
I think as long as it's not hurting other people. I think the thing that I struggle with is trying to make myself happy because then I feel guilty. So because I don't have a job right now. Well, I do have one, but it doesn't really count as a job, right? Because it's shit,
Well,
to be honest.
you're on your way out of a job into a new one.
I feel guilty doing anything in my day that's not productive because there's other people out there that are working full time. So I try to fill my day with jobs, and I've recently done a podcast about filling in time instead of wisely spending time. And yeah, that is something that I want to be focusing on, because I don't think it's a bad thing that I do things that I enjoy.
I don't think so either. And so I think it's great that you spend a bit of time concentrating on that.
Well, because the fact is I just don't do things I enjoy. I spend so much time just filling in time with jobs and chores and things.
Yeah.
And I've kind of lost sight of what makes me happy. And I think I need to find what makes me happy, what lights my spark, follow that, and hopefully that will lead to some kind of gainful employment or making a difference in the world. I mean, it's kind of what I'm doing with the podcast. This is something I love doing.
Yeah, yep.
I don't know how helpful people find it, but I'm really enjoying making it, and I'm making it for me. So other people listening and other people getting help from it is a bonus.
Yep, just an added joy for you.
This is just something I'm doing because I like doing it. I'm not trying to get anything. Yeah, I'm just doing it.
Great stuff.
So maybe this is the Buddha thing. This is just the happiness.
I really enjoy it as well. Just count me as another listener. Yeah.
My stomach has started rumbling completely through this thing. So
okay.
I don't know if you've got anything else to say or whether we should wrap up.
I think we're finished.
I mean, we don't even have any monkey shoulder today because it's in the morning.
We do have a tea and a coffee though.
We do. Yeah. I mean, this slurping thing though.
That's been a big boundary of other people, has it?
Yeah, but I mean, they're listening to my podcast, so it's kind of, you can't really set a boundary on my podcast. I mean, you just don't listen, right?
That's right. Exactly.
If I start doing or not doing things on the podcast because somebody tells me to, obviously I want to please the listeners, but I don't want to give over control of how I run this to other people.
Yeah.
So, if you want to slurp, feel free.
Okay. Perhaps I'll leave it this time, but I do think that...
at the same time, I do want to take criticism. If
exactly.
Slurping is bothering everybody, I will not allow my guests to do that.
So I do think that, yes, our lovely host will be servants to all, but only in ways that are good for her. So.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. We'll definitely chat again, and I really hope I don't lose this episode as well.
All right. I'll be keeping an eye out for it. So.
Is there anything you wanted to say in closing?
No, apart from thank you very much again for having me on.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming along. I've heard that people like hearing from you. I think you have a nice, calming voice and some good opinions, so...
Okay, great.
I mean, you'll be taking over soon.
No, not at all. No.
There you go. Slowly.
Edging you out.
Soon it's going to be a co-host, I reckon.
Oh, that's right. Do I get payment for that?
Well, I'm not getting paid, so what am I going to pay you with? Maybe in compliments.
Oh, okay.
From the listeners, never from me.
No. I've already received too many from you, and that was just one.
What? Oh, true. I did give one away.
Oh.
But that's probably payment enough from someone coming from a cult, because you live for others and the approval of others, right?
Exactly right. I'm going to be living the rest of this day with a basking glow of warmth in my heart.
All right, we better stop waffling on now. I think we're done with all that kerfuffle.
I think so.
That's not how you use kerfuffle, is it?
It is, yeah.
It is?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Kerfuffle's a great word. It's a very cultish word, though, isn't it?
Cultish?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Do any of your other friends use the word kerfuffle?
I don't know. I think I might have got it from my mum.
Yes, I got it from my mum too. Oh, well, we'll have another kerfuffle sometime soon.
Yeah, well, and I feel like a kerfuffle is a fight, though.
Yeah. It's a disturbance.
Yeah, we're not...
Of some sort.
Are we disturbing anything here?
Just disturbing the peace, that's all.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate you. If you'd like to reach out, ask any questions, vent, say whatever you need to say, even if that's getting annoyed about something I've said, email me at exculted@gmail.com. That's exculted@gmail.com. And always remember, you can walk your own way, speak your own truth, and live your own life. Bye!